Welcome to lesson 4 of the video lessons. The usual warning / reminder, this does not have much in the way of specific evidence. You are expected to find out on your own using the reading. What we're focusing on here is the analysis, why stuff happens, what effect it has, any counterpoints, etc, etc. Because that stuff is what is not in the textbooks, or at least not very clear, and is very important for the upper marks. So, today, we are looking at New Liberalism. The New Liberal question revolves around the idea that it was a fundamental break in British politics. It was fundamentally different, and there's a big emphasis on what effect it had. Additionally, it is a paragraph in the why did 1906 question, why did 1906 happen question. And arguably can also be used in a much later paragraph about splits in the Liberal Party. That's part of an essay question in 1924. So, to understand New Liberalism, it's very important you have a look at, well, first thing first, Conservatives formatting has not gone well. You have a look at the summary here. This is a very crude diagram of the natural party allegiance. Okay. There are obviously exceptions based on region, based on area, okay, etc, etc, etc. But broadly, the disenfranchised working class don't matter. That's one in the bottom right-hand corner because they don't have a vote, so we don't care about them. And you see clustering on towards the Conservative vote. We see landowners, business owners, yeoman farmers. Middle classes and small business owners tend to be a bit more centrist, but are on the side of the Conservatives, with the Liberals getting special interest groups such as the religious nonconformists, the City of London financiers, the Irish nationalists, etc, etc. And they tend to get the sympathy of the slightly, on average, poorer members, civil service, upper working class and artisans. Okay, and also some morally or religiously motivated middle class people, people on particularly after liberalism. This dichotomy, as you can tell, and the sizes are relative to their rough representation of how much the electorate they represent, although it's not, it's me just doing sizes of boxes. This system is roughly 50-50, if you argue all politics finds its equilibrium before it does, before it's finished, but arguably slightly, ever so slightly, favours the Tories. In the start of the 20th century, end of the 19th century, the rise of a potential third party, one representing the socialists, is becoming more and more and more clear, and it's becoming more and more probable. It's important to know that the Labour Party does not exist as Labour Party in 1918, but the idea there could be a socialist party had been one from the 1870s, 1880s. Many countries had their own socialist parties by this point. Italy, France, Germany all had various incarnations of a socialist party well before anything even slightly formal in Britain. So it's seen as an inevitability. And as well as that, it's also seen as an inevitability that more and more poor people will get the right to vote. Now, if you have a look at this map with a potential party which represents poorer interest, what we see then is the natural centre of gravity shifts. Much of the liberal base, particularly the poor elements of society, the Irish nationalists, start having a sympathy and will start voting for Labour, as opposed to Liberals. So Liberals are individualist, i.e. they are slightly nicer, more forgiving than perhaps the Conservatives, but ultimately believe the government should be limited, the state shouldn't be involved too much, individuals should be encouraged. Labour Party, if it's socialist, will be collectivist. It's the role of the government to help look after the people. They will naturally, therefore, get quite a lot of sympathy from the majority of the votes that Liberals get. And what will potentially happen is you will have a three-way fight in which the Tories have not lost too much of their vote, the Liberals have lost a significant chunk. At its best, you will have Labour and Liberals split in the vote, and therefore the Tories will win. At its worst, Labour will just have end up taking all the votes from Liberals, as though at a certain point, people think if they want to keep the Conservatives out, you might as well vote for the Labour Party because the Liberals will never win. So clearly, where Liberals stand ideologically is fine for now, But with the rise of the left and the rise of the working class vote and the potential rise of a left-wing socialist party, the Liberals might be left behind. So they need to change their ideology to do one of two things. Either be left-wing enough so that there doesn't seem to be a need for a new Labour Party, a new left-wing socialist party, because the Liberals do it pretty much fine. Or be left-wing enough so that they can keep enough of the votes supporting them as opposed to Labour. The danger in this, if you shift to the left, you are going to lose your right wing. So they can't go too far to the left, because then all the right wing say, well, I don't vote for this party because I want socialism, I vote for the Tories then. And then it does the same thing, you lose votes. Liberalism, up until this point, had been dominated by Gladstone, and it was called Gladstonian Liberalism. Okay? Gladstonian Liberalism is essentially brilliant in the 1800s, is not suited for the 1900s. It is a very strongly laissez-faire government. No government action, reduced role of state, poverty is caused by choice, all the stuff that we have mentioned. They do not care too much about poorer voters because they go, well, they're not going to vote for the Tories, so don't worry about it. Okay? This is complacent because naturally, yes, they won't vote for the Tories, but what's to stop them making their own party, as they do? The Gladstonian Liberalism as well, actually, apart from the idea that Ireland should have home rule, not independence, home rule, there should be free trade, and the political system should be made more democratic. Not too democratic, so like poor people get the vote, but like reduce the power of the House of Lords. Apart from those things, they're actually very divided about everything else. How much should the empire be, what should be the role of the monarch, etc., etc. Okay? And therefore, what happens is, whatever Gladstone said was that what the Liberal Party stood for, even after he died, carried on being the thing the Liberals did, because that's what Gladstone said. Because Gladstone was such a big figure, because he was the one who defined all the conflicts, because he was the one who made Gladstonian liberalism, he became almost a list of gospel. We are anti-imperialist because Gladstone was anti-imperialist, for example. Okay? So, Gladstonian liberalism is the liberalism of the Liberal Party going into the 1900s. This, if we think back to this, will not work. As more poor people get the right to vote, as the Socialist Party gets more support, there is no reason for the artisans and the upper working class to not vote for Labour, unless Labour is crazy, crazy left-wing. Okay? And there's not even much reason for Irish nationalists to do so either. Gladstonian liberalism is actually not too different from the Conservatives. So why would you vote for Liberals if not the Conservatives? So what will happen is they'll lose the vote. What comes in, therefore, is there is a need for a new type of liberalism. Now there are two forces, one ideological and arguably slightly more pure, and one a bit more practical and a bit more political. Rowntree, Booth to a less extent, and the two Hobbes, John Hobson and Leonard Hobhouse, the two Hobbes, who are Fabians, which are, or used to be Fabians, actually left the Fabian Society in the 1890s, but originally Fabians, so socialists, they create much of the basic arguments, economic ideology, and much of the writing, the literature, the marks of socialism. The Hobbes are the almost the equivalents. Okay? The political practitioners, Winston Churchill, David Lloyd George, and to a less extent Asquith amongst them, they are the ones who realise that they need to play this political game, okay? And therefore, to avoid this, they need to shift their policy to get enough of those upper working class voters and enough of those artisan workers and those Irish nationalist voters to just keep voting them. So what happens is we have an ideological argument, and then it is taken and cherry-picked and adapted and changed and ignored and emphasised depending on what the politicians think will help them get elected and help them stay in power on the threat of the socialists. So there are two forces. So always point out whenever a source comes up, where is it from? Is it from one of the Hobbes or an ideological chap, or is it from a politician? Because actually they're different. On average, the ideology is much more, the ideologues, the Hobbes, etc., are much more radical. They call for much more radical things. For example, a massive increase in inheritance tax and a lot more social mobility. The politicians, because they always wanted to keep an eye on making sure they also get elected, they tend to pick the popular stuff but ignore the less popular stuff. So what neoliberalism is ideologically and what it actually looks like in government are two different things. They're related, but it is much more of a pared down, simplified version for David Lloyd George and Winston Churchill, what you see in government. So how do you therefore change a policy? Well, it's very easy. What you could do is you could just overnight announce a new set of policies, and therefore that's your new stance. The danger in that is then you will lose a lot of your old supporters. And this is the perennial thing about neoliberalism. It needs to shift the ideas of the Liberal Party more leftwards to capture the changing attitudes in poverty and take advantage of that, but also to secure against a rise of a socialist party. Or if a socialist party happens anyway, then at least they are in a great position to avoid losing all their votes to them. Okay? So they need to go left enough for that. But if they go too far left-wing, then all those traditional Gladstonian supporters, the people who quite like the Gladstonian liberalism, the sort of middle classes and some of the upper working classes, and even some of the elite support, the sort of business support, they will go, well, this isn't the party I voted for. This is a lot more government intervention, a lot less Gladstonian. And they will go to the Tories. So what you need is you need to make the argument more left-wing, but at the same time showing that you are basically still the same party. Yeah? So what you do is you just reinterpret what liberalism is. So what they said is in the 19th century, we are the party of freedom. We are the party of freedom and free choice and enterprise and individual effort. So in the 19th century, we fought for economic and political freedom, so i.e. tariffs, for changes to democracy so more people have the right to vote, to reduce the power of the House of Lords, to reduce the power of the monarchy. That's what we stood for, and we won that fight. But in the 20th century, we are now looking for a more pervasive type of freedom, i.e. some people are perfectly free. The rich, the middle class are perfectly free. But there are some people, some working class people, who, as has been seen by the work of Rowntree and Booth, want to be better, are prepared to work hard, but are held back by their economic situation, held back by the fact they don't make enough money, held back by the fact they don't have a good enough education, held back by the fact that they are too poor when they are older and so they have to look after their parents, held back by the fact that they're really unsanitary, so they're really unhealthy, which means they're unable to work very well. And therefore, they are not free. And that's the key idea. They are not free to be individuals. They cannot be individuals. They can't make a business. They can't work hard. They want to, but they're being held back by the health, by the education, the wages, the circumstances. And therefore, you cannot self-help your way out. The role of liberals, therefore, should not just give people political freedom, therefore. It should be to give them an economic and social freedom. Now, this is absolutely ingenious as a ploy. Now, it's very difficult to appreciate why, but let's just go through this, okay? You need to make a new left-wing ideology. Fine, easy. However, you need to do it in a way that doesn't upset your right-wing people. Okay? That's harder. You also need to do it in a way that shows that you have not changed that much. So what they've done is they've said, well, we're about freedom, so we're the same. But they have not said that poor people deserve stuff. That's what the socialists say. Poor people deserve stuff because the system is bad. No, no, no. They have kept the traditional ideas of, well, there are morally failing people and they're not, and the morally failing people deserve to be punished. What they are saying is, look at Rowntree and Booth. There are some people who are not morally failing, who can make the country richer if they worked harder, worked better, but they can't because they are stopped. And therefore what the government should do, and what the role of the state is to provide the bare basics, nothing too big, because that would upset the middle classes, the bare basics, which mean that people are healthier, people are better educated, people have a better material circumstance, and particularly young people grow up in that sort of circumstance, which means that should they therefore want to, they can then make themselves wealthier, and they can self-help themselves, and they can be the individualist themselves. And if they are lazy, then they will still suffer, and they will still be punished. So actually, all what's happening here is, as we said in the last lesson about lessons ago about the change attitude to poverty, they're not saying that poor people deserve to be helped. They're saying that they need to help people, hard-working poor people who deserve help, work their way out of poverty. It's social mobility, not socialism. Now, it is easier to get support from this on your right wing. Okay? Because, number one, you are not changing the basic assumptions. Some poor people are there because they are lazy and they are feckless. They don't deserve to be helped. They are not saying they should help those people. So you're not annoying them, number one. Number two, you are saying, well, we are still individualist. We want people to work on their own individual, we want people to self-help. We just want to help more people do it so the country gets richer. And that's, you can agree with that. You can say, well, actually, no, I'm not against poor people suffering for no reason. So that makes a lot of sense. And as well as that, because it's about providing the bare minimum, the barest minimum to make sure that people don't suffer too much and therefore can make a chance, it also won't cost that much. And the state won't be too big. And so it reassures the right wing that actually, yeah, well, we are giving pensions, we are doing schools, but they're not too big and they're not too expensive, and actually people can't live on it, so they still have to self-help. So what's happening is essentially you are taxing the very, very, very richest, not the middle classes because you need to support you. You are giving that to help the poor, but only so they work harder and self-help their way out. And that could help the economy, because then by people having more money, they can then buy more stuff, and that helps businesses flow. This is, and that bottom bullet point is key. New liberalism is genius, not because it's necessarily correct, but politically it is perfect for what the liberals need to do. They need to change to be more left-wing to make sure their left-wing supporters don't leave them for socialists, or to, at best, make the socialists go, oh, you know what, they're quite good, let's join them, rather than be a separate party. But at the same time, they haven't changed any of the basic assumptions that poverty is due to moral failings, human nature is inherently better when you leave them alone, not give them the state, and reassures everyone that there's not going to be too much money spent. You have to have this to keep your right wing happy. So what this is a brilliant halfway between the middle. It's, in theory, is enough to show that you are increasing more left-wing to get support for certain people, but at the same time not too far. Now in reality, actually, many Gladstonians get angry and leave, but it isn't a massive amount. So some considerations there. Number one, why does this happen? Okay. Well, obviously you can say there's a political calculation, as we mentioned, but you can also say it happens because it fills a gap. And it follows ideas and logic which has come from the changing attitude towards poverty. It is not an accident that new liberalism happens in the 1900s as opposed to 1880s. Because in the 1880s, no one would have wanted heard an argument that some poor people don't deserve to be poor. But as we saw in lesson 2, that attitude that some poor people are actually there not because of choice becomes more popular, and therefore the idea that government action should happen becomes more popular, and therefore you're more likely to have people listen to you if you push new liberalism. The big thing to emphasize, new liberalism is different to different people. Okay? Certain politicians who are looking to win elections will pick certain parts, so David Lloyd George and Churchill in particular, will pick certain parts which help them get elected and ignore others. So what David Lloyd George's new liberalism will be different and more politically viable, i.e. less left-wing, than what the Hobbes say. So always keep an eye out for the sources. Additionally, the new liberalism is really aiming to almost purvey their wares. They are saying to the rising, more left-wing opinion, the more left-wing, the increasingly powerful unions who are questioning whether liberalism is for them, they are saying to them, look, we can give you the stuff. Do not bother and take a risk and try and create a new party or support the new parties that are being existed. Stay with us, we can give you what you want at the same time as we have far more chance of actually getting into power. So new liberalism is left-wing enough to encourage people to stay with them, or if that fails, makes it easier to make an alliance with them. As well as that, there are some reformers. There are this argument also is used as part of a moral argument. To get some of the more religious and more moralistic supporters amongst liberals to support it, they sell it as a moral crusade as opposed to a political one. Religious Methodists will not go for a cynical political ploy. If you say, though, that Jesus, etc., etc., about his role in the poor, etc., and therefore that's what we're replicating, they're far more likely to support it. So you might see some people, depending on their audience, selling this as a moral crusade as opposed to a political one. It's also worth bearing in mind that some people will be sympathetic to this, not because they like the idea of the poor being treated nicely, but they have been convinced by the national efficiency debate that something needs to be done. And Balfour's not doing anything. And the Tories aren't really doing anything apart from fighting amongst themselves about tariffs. So you might be a middle class person who doesn't massively believe the idea that the poor need much help. But you might also believe that actually we do need to make the poor stronger. And so therefore you will maybe be more sympathetic and support new liberalism so long as it only achieves those objectives. And this is a reason why, if you have a look at a lot of the policies, some of the most successful policies, or at least where they put the most effort in, education is a case in point, focus on national efficiency stuff, i.e. let's give the children school meals, let's give them school nurses, as opposed to sort of ideological, let's make themselves better. Schools do not improve the quality of education very much. They do improve the quality of health. This is because it is more politically popular to do some change, tick, 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 left wing, but also make sure it's national efficiency related so the right wing is also happy. So, what is new liberalism? New liberalism is fundamentally not one ideology. It really depends on who you talk to, and as I've already mentioned, the ideologues believe certain things, the political pragmatists believe certain things, the more moral reformers will focus on certain things, temperance and that sort of stuff, and less about other things, pensions, for example. So everyone kind of sees what they want in it. But what fundamentally unifies it is not a radical break with the past. It still believes in laissez-faire economics. The state should be kept to a minimum because the state is not good. Yeah? People are better when they are left alone. It is therefore not radical. New liberalism is deliberately not radical. It is an evolution. It is a leftward step. It is certainly an expansion in the role of the state, but it is not revolutionary. And it still fundamentally agrees that there is deserving poor and undeserving poor. It just says the government needs to do more to help some of the deserving poor who had been left out because they had been thought previously as undeserving. The significant differences, and you will need to research your own and make sure you get your own specific examples, is there is across all of this the idea that the government should do something. There should be more state intervention to reduce the effects of poverty that limits people's ability then to improve themselves. So it's not about saying let's make poverty less bad, because for some people who are lazy you want poverty to be bad. Yeah, if you're lazy you don't deserve any handouts, but you are reducing poverty in the areas and ways that it stops people from making a success of their lives. Okay, so therefore certain groups are given health welfare, others are not. So you do not see a blanket everyone get X, apart from one or two examples. And even then it's all old people as opposed to anything else. So certain groups who are seen as deserving, or seen as, if you help them, you will help, like children, they will be more likely to then turn their life around and work hard and make a success of themselves, as opposed to people who are already grown up. There's also an emphasis, therefore, on, rather than the state giving stuff for free, people who work hard should get it back. You don't want to encourage people just to get free unemployment insurance. You need to pay into it. It is a contributory or insurance-based system, as opposed to anything else. So what this basically means is they do not believe in giving everyone everything, and they do not believe that you should. Since they have not changed their mind about laissez-faire economics, they don't want to encourage people to be lazy by just giving them free stuff. You encourage people to work hard by saying, if you work hard, then you have a job. If you have a job, you pay money into this insurance scheme, which is run by the government. Then in return, to reward your hard individual work and to make sure that you are encouraged to carry on working hard, you get some unemployment insurance. So again, it's fundamentally resting upon this idea of undeserving and deserving poor. Finally, it is really not massive in terms of its scope. New liberalism does not have any broader domestic ideas. It doesn't focus on tariffs, it doesn't focus on Ireland, it doesn't focus on law and order, it doesn't focus on health really, beyond there needs to be welfare. It is only welfare related. There's very little new liberalism about constitutional reform. It is very much focused on this one idea, and there's absolutely no foreign policy in new liberalism. So while you might say that, I don't know, socialism covers, sort of socialists also believe, yes, they believe in a big state, but yes, they also believe that there should be a far more democratic system, there should be nicer policies in law and order, there should be racial equality, blah, 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 and also internationally we should be friends of all the other working class people, we should spread socialism, etc. Because they believe in all of that, despite that, because they believe in all of that, they are a holistic, sort of united ideology. They cover all these different things. Whereas new liberalism is not the same. New liberalism only is an ideology which focuses on welfare and the role of the state. It is not a broad ideology. So it's often described not as an ideology in and of itself, more of a special interest. So how and why did this succeed? Rid from your mind the idea that ideas inherently are popular. No idea is naturally popular or unpopular. It depends on the society in which the idea is in. Now, had new liberalism happened in the 1880s, and kind of it was with the Fabians, it would not have worked. However, that's not the case. It happens in the 1900s. And because of the actions of Rowntree, Booth, national efficiency debate, except imperial socialism, that we looked in lesson 2, people were more willing to accept the idea that not all poor people deserve to be poor, and the government should be involved. So therefore, when new liberalism rocks up, suggesting that, they go, oh yeah, look, new liberalism, let's do that. Okay? It is fortuitously timed. Now in reality it's not. Like in reality the people who come up with these ideas are writing at the same time and coming up with them at the same time that these ideas are being discussed anyway and getting inspiration from them. But basically it taps into the public zeitgeist. The idea that people want to have at that point that actually, yeah, poverty is bad. It would not have worked 20 years before. Arguably as well, as more and more poor people got the vote and the rise of the Labour Party increased, more and more people have been politicised into the idea that perhaps we should do this. Perhaps we should give people the vote. And perhaps we should do these ideas. Essentially, as there are more poor people who are politically active, the more support for these ideas that there are. In 1832, 2% of the population could vote, the richest 2% roughly. Okay? New liberalism would not have worked, because the people who could vote for the political parties would not have voted for it. Now we've got many more working class, upper working class people being able to vote. Ideas of new liberalism are more popular. As well as this, as already mentioned, national efficiency debate. helps people who don't necessarily believe in the moral argument that poor deserve to be helped. They will support new liberalism because they see it as a way to get national sufficiency. Okay, and there are some middle class people who hate the idea of giving poor people stuff, but are so worried about socialism that they go, you know what, I'd rather have new liberalism and a little bit of socialism, as they saw it, and that would stop there being actual socialism. You basically give a little bit of breadcrumbs to the poor, therefore they don't have a revolution. They see, therefore, as a pragmatic decision. Okay, give a little bit of new liberalism, stop a lot. Yeah, reform a little bit to discourage there from being a revolution and there being huge amounts of change. So, what does new liberalism do? It gives a party a platform. Okay, it provides a common platform that everyone agrees on, and therefore makes the party, get more popular support, and makes party organised and competent, and confident even, and competent. Essentially, at the same time that the Liberals have this brand new spanking programme, very modern, very organised, everyone's getting on, everyone's saying, look, new liberalism, everyone agrees, although technically they don't agree belief to service. At the same time, the Tories are ripping themselves to pieces in the tariff reform. So you have a choice now, two parties. New liberalism, everyone speaks up the same thing, look how exciting and confident and organised we are, hooray, or monkey knife fight about tariffs. So obviously everyone's going to go for, or more people are going to go for the image that Liberals are more organised than a proper party of government. Likewise, David Lloyd George, who was a MP but a non-entity, becomes associated with this ideology, and therefore it helps push him into leadership. Yeah, he now becomes a national figure as one of the principal spokesmen of new liberalism, and because it's popular, he becomes popular. As he becomes popular, he becomes politically important. As he becomes politically important, he takes ministerial positions. When he takes ministerial positions, he then becomes more popular because he's a public figure. So it helps get him into government. As well as this, new liberalism, by organising the party, by providing something popular to approve on, by providing unity, by providing something to get support on the left and the right, by making up an issue, showing the LRC that they could be friends, all of this helps towards 1906, and then we'll do part of that in the 1906 lesson, which is next. Arguably, though, in the long term, it causes more problems. There are many Gladstonians who are either leave straight away, or are uneasy about this. They are prepared to accept it in 1906 to win the election, but they do not want it to go too far. This starts a division between the Gladstonians and the New Liberals, okay, which will continue until 1916. And it is interesting that the New Liberals side almost entirely with David Lloyd George, and the Gladstonians almost entirely with Asquith. Okay, you can argue that by having a new ideology replacing an old one, you are encouraging a split in a party, because it's very easy to have two sides in a party if it's about two different ideologies. Okay, and it's very easy to have a them and us, and therefore it makes it much easier when there is a split. All the Gladstonians go, right, out of these two men, Asquith or Lloyd George, who is more similar to our ideology? And obviously it's Asquith. So they go with Asquith. And the New Liberals do the same thing. It makes a clean split, but it means that the Liberals are fundamentally split. That'll be part of the 1924 argument. We'll go into that much more detail. Arguably as well, with new liberalism leads to new liberal policies. New liberal policies causes the constitutional crisis of 1909. Hopefully that's self-evident. The big thing you can say about new liberalism, if it was intended to make policy more left-wing, so that Labour Party either A, doesn't need to exist, / will join the Liberals, or B, people who would otherwise vote for Labour Party see that the Liberals are doing nice things for them and go, I will carry on voting for the Liberals. If that was its aim, it does not succeed, because the Labour Party carries on growing and stays independent. So you can say new liberalism as a political idea fails. Probably. Because actually, how do we know that? Yes, it doesn't mean Labour stops, but it might have slowed down Labour massively. but we can't prove that because we don't know. Okay, there's an argument to say what New Liberalism did is actually, up until World War One, it was allowed the Labour Party and Liberals to get closer and closer and closer, and was the reason why the Labour Party by 1914 only had 36 seats. Actually, was a decline from its high in 1910. Sorry. So actually, it was working. It was only the war which actually then led the rise of Labour. Okay, you can agree with that, you cannot. But basically, you can say if you're going to say New Liberalism does not work to make the Labour Party organised, then you have a lot more arguments against that, saying, well, actually, it might have delayed it. It could have worked had it been something else. Okay, that is it for today. We are going to look on at 1906 next lesson, and then from there move pretty quickly into liberal reforms. Once again, have a good one. I will see you in the next video.